There is a particular kind of darkness that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't growl or snarl. It doesn't wear a mask. It smiles. It shakes your hand. It remembers your name. It makes you feel, in some strange and inexplicable way, that you are the most important person in the room. And then, when the lights go down and the doors are locked, it becomes something else entirely. Something the human mind struggles to name, because naming it would mean accepting that it exists, that it walks among us, that it always has, and that it looks nothing like what we were told to fear. This is the story of Theodore Robert Bundy. But more than that, this is the story of what he revealed about us, about the systems that failed, the people who were fooled, the women who were hunted, and the science that spent decades trying to understand how a human being becomes a predator without ever losing his smile. Theodore Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, into a world that had already complicated his identity before he took his first breath. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was 22 years old, unmarried, and living in a society that treated unwed mothers with a cruelty that bordered on institutional. To protect the family from scandal, young Ted was raised for the first years of his life believing that his grandparents were his parents, and that his mother was his older sister. The lie was architecture, carefully constructed, load-bearing, and ultimately devastating. Because when Ted Bundy eventually learned the truth, something shifted in him. Something that had perhaps always been loose became untethered entirely. His grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was a man of violent temper and domineering personality, a man who, by multiple accounts, terrorized the household with unpredictability and rage. And yet young Ted idolized him. He followed him. He studied him. Psychologists who later examined Bundy's childhood would point to this early relationship as a formative shadow, a blueprint of masculinity built on control, on fear, on the performance of power. Ted watched his grandfather and learned, perhaps without knowing he was learning, that strength meant dominance, and dominance meant never being vulnerable, never being exposed, never being the one left without answers. The family eventually relocated to Tacoma, Washington, where Eleanor married Johnny Bundy, a quiet, mild-mannered man who gave Ted his surname but never truly captured his affection. Ted's stepfather was, by most accounts, a decent man. And that, perhaps, was part of the problem. Decency bored Ted Bundy. It always would. He was drawn, compulsively and from an early age, to things that were forbidden. Neighbors later recalled finding him as a young child standing over sleeping family members with kitchen knives, a wide smile on his face, curious in a way that made the skin crawl. These were not the tantrums of a troubled child. They were something quieter, something more deliberate. By the time Bundy reached adolescence, he had already developed what psychologists now recognize as the hallmarks of an emerging antisocial personality. He was charming, effortlessly, almost supernaturally charming. He could read a room the way a musician reads a score, instinctively, fluently, adjusting in real time to give people exactly what they needed to hear. He excelled in school when he chose to. He was articulate. He was handsome. He carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that made people want to be near him, to earn his approval, to be seen by him. And underneath all of it, behind the warmth and the wit and the easy laugh, there was nothing. A coldness so complete it functioned like a void. In college at the University of Washington, Bundy fell deeply in love, or performed something so close to love that even he may not have known the difference. Her name was Stephanie Brooks, a wealthy, sophisticated young woman from California who represented everything Ted hungered for: status, beauty, refinement, a world that seemed permanently out of reach. She broke up with him in 1968, finding him directionless and immature. And Bundy, who had never truly learned to process rejection, filed the wound away somewhere deep and airless, where it would fester for years before it exploded into something catastrophic. Because that is one of the most disturbing truths about Ted Bundy, that his murders were not random, that they were, in a sense, a conversation. A long, terrible, one-sided conversation with a woman who had left him. Nearly every victim shared a profile: young, white women with long dark hair parted in the middle, slender, college-educated, attractive. Women who looked, with unsettling consistency, like Stephanie Brooks. Criminologists and forensic psychologists have spent years unpacking what this means, the degree to which Bundy's violence was rooted not in pure psychopathy but in wounded narcissism, in the catastrophic collision between an inflated self-image and an inability to tolerate not being chosen. He graduated from the University of Washington in 1972 with a degree in psychology, a fact that strikes most people as either ironic or deeply sinister, and is perhaps both. He was accepted to law school. He was working in politics. People around him spoke of a bright future, of charisma, of potential. And all the while, in the spaces between his legitimate life, something else was taking shape. Something patient and methodical and utterly without conscience. The killings began, as best investigators can determine, in 1974. Though Bundy himself would later hint that they started earlier, and the full truth of his timeline remains one of the darkest open questions in the history of American crime. What is known is that in January of 1974, a young woman named Karen Sparks was attacked in her Seattle apartment while she slept. She survived, though she was left with permanent injuries. 1 month later, Linda and Healy disappeared from her basement bedroom near the University of Washington campus. Her blood was found on her pillow. Her nightgown was hung neatly in her closet. Over the next several months, women began vanishing from the Pacific Northwest with a frequency that should have triggered alarm far sooner than it did. Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball. Each one young. Each one with dark hair. Each one gone without a trace, as if the earth had simply absorbed them. And the man responsible was, during this same period, attending law school, volunteering on political campaigns, working at a suicide hotline, sitting across from people in crisis and talking them back from the edge, with a voice that everyone described as calm, as warm, as trustworthy. It was at Lake Sammamish State Park in the summer of 1974 that Bundy became, for the first time, almost visible. On a single afternoon, July 14th, he approached multiple women in broad daylight, his arm in a sling, asking for help loading a sailboat onto his car. His name, he told them, was Ted. 2 women went with him that day. Janice Ott and Denise Naslund were both reported missing before sunset. Witnesses gave police a description. A composite sketch was drawn. And for the first time, a name floated to the surface, Ted, with a brown Volkswagen Beetle. Tips came in. Thousands of them. And among those thousands, the name Theodore Bundy appeared multiple times. Submitted by colleagues. By an ex-girlfriend. By people who knew him, who had felt something they couldn't quite name in his presence and were relieved, in a guilty way, to finally have a form to file it on. But the leads were not prioritized. The system was overwhelmed. And Bundy, sensing nothing or perhaps sensing everything, moved on. He transferred to the University of Utah Law School in the fall of 1974. And the disappearances followed him. In Utah, in Colorado, in Oregon, women continued to vanish. Some were found, many were not. And with each passing month, the distance between the smiling law student and the predator beneath him grew smaller in the eyes of investigators, even as it remained perfectly invisible to everyone who knew him in daily life. His girlfriend at the time, a woman named Carolyn Boone, would later describe him as the most kind and attentive man she had ever known. His neighbors called him a good guy. His professors found him bright and engaged. This is the part that keeps criminologists awake. Not the violence. Violence, in its most primitive form, is something the human mind can process. What disturbs is the mask, the completeness of it. The fact that Ted Bundy did not slip, did not crack under social pressure, did not betray himself in the small, unconscious ways that most people, even skilled liars, eventually do. He had constructed a self so convincing, so internally consistent, that it functioned as its own reality. He believed in it. And because he believed in it, everyone around him did too. In August of 1975, a Utah Highway Patrol officer named Bob Hayward pulled over a tan Volkswagen Beetle driving without headlights in a residential neighborhood at nearly 3 in the morning. The driver was calm, polite. He explained that he had been to a late movie. The officer noticed the passenger seat was missing. That the interior of the car had been rearranged in unusual ways. That among the items inside, handcuffs, a ski mask, rope, an ice pick, a crowbar, and strips of torn cloth, was a configuration of objects that had no innocent explanation. The driver's name was Theodore Robert Bundy, and the machinery of justice, slow and grinding as it had been, finally closed around him. But the story, by that point, was far from over, because Ted Bundy had one more act to perform. And it would be the most audacious of his life.